then I realized that I didn't kind of want to be pigeonholed as a woman who paints bodies. Someone once said to me that women are quite restricted as painters, that they only have two subjects. It's either sex or madness. And I thought, no, you don't get to categorize me. Should we start with that?
Sure. Okay. So I did go to art college, but I did graphic design. I didn't do art. So I've never had any art training, like painting or, proper training. And I worked in that film industry for about 10, 15 years. And just because it was freelance, I painted anytime that I had spare. So I just carried on doing my stuff, collages, painting and stuff in that time. And I had loads of time to do that. So I guess I just did it for me, not for anybody, not thinking it was going to be a career or anything. And I think maybe that's why I ended up painting sex, because it was just private. It was just for me. And I didn't think it was ever going to be out in a public sphere. And, but then I started painting and thought, oh, actually, this is a really nice thing to do. The film industry is getting a bit hard with my kids, because you're often on a shoot for like 18-hour days and stuff, and it didn't kind of fit in with having small children. So gradually I started working more on that and got a studio outside of the house, and just went there whilst the kids were at school every day. And then that led to me just having a studio full of paintings, and then Damien saw them, and that's how come it sort of, he just said, he just bought one actually and put it in a group show, and then he really loved it when he saw it in the flesh, and then said, you should paint more. And so I just started frenziedly painting.
That's really interesting, because I think for me too, like I went to art school and kind of ended up down a different career path. I was working with hard to reach young people doing community outreach work. And I used to curate some shows, work for a few galleries, but it wasn't until I think I was probably kind of up against it, with a child as well. And I'd kind of hit a wall with my work out in the world, and just had this desperate urge to paint. And it was really personal. I had no kind of aspirations to kind of put it out into the world yet. It was definitely this urge that I was following, and I couldn't afford a studio at the time, so my parents gave me a room in their house. So I was just painting from after I dropped my son off at school until I picked him up, and I was kind of vomiting paintings, and they were all like really mad, and I was kind of painting the stuff around me. It felt really, really important to look, and I was, because my parents don't really ever throw stuff away, so there's a lot of stuff from my childhood, and I was kind of vibing off that energy, kind of processing, I think, possibly my childhood, which I didn't even realize I was doing at the time. And then, once I'd kind of got this real energy for painting, I thought I need to do something with this. So I applied to the Royal College, and got in first time and got a full scholarship, and that just then set me off. I think it is, having a little bit of support, like you're mentioning Damien, for you was your kind of champion. For me, it was getting into the Royal College, and same as you, I really feel like I wasn't producing anything that I wanted to put out in the world yet. And when I was at the Royal College, I think as well, I never had that kind of drive that I was working towards my final show. I didn't want to kind of prove anything to anyone other than myself. Like when I got there, I took all the colour out of my work, for example, and that maybe wasn't like the smartest career move, thinking about your final show. But I like the idea that you're saying that you were making work for yourself, because I think I still do that. It is really exciting, and you can see why. I mean, I remember seeing your work at Newport Gallery.
Newport Street,
yeah. And just like being overwhelmed by the size of them and the surface of the paint. And actually, what I liked about them was that you didn't see the imagery necessarily straight away all the time. You know, sometimes it was in your face, but sometimes it wasn't, and that kind of push and pull was really exciting.
So after the Royal College, then you just went for it as well. You kept vomiting paintings.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm just always trying to push myself. I think it's kind of like a bit of a conversation with me and the paintings. I think, well, I went to St Martin's in the 90s and was making video work because you weren't really allowed to paint. But I think when I made the decision to be a painter and was at the Royal College, I was very clear that I just wanted to stick within those almost restrictions of the kind of rectangle. And I think the trajectory, you know, has just been a natural progression. At you know, I guess I was painting from still life before the Royal College, and then when I got there, I met a guy, and I was painting him. He was very much an influence, and then I turned the lens on myself, and I was painting the female body. And I think at that point, I was getting a little bit of feedback from the world, and then I realised that I didn't kind of want to be pigeonholed as a woman who paints bodies. Someone once said to me that you know, women are quite restricted as painters, that they only have two subjects. It's either sex or madness. And I thought, no, you don't get to categorize me. So I went off down a different trajectory and became very inspired by dancing in my studio and listening to music, and that was like, I guess, a similar drive. You know, I think my drive comes from, you know, just a huge amount of pent up force of something. It could be female sexuality, it could be anger. You know, there's a drive that's pushing me. And then I did this project with my friend Kieran, who's known in the world as Fortet. And then there was this lovely feedback loop. He would send me music and I would respond to that. So that felt like a kind of a body of work that I was interested in following. And I think music is still really, really important. But the language of my work has changed slightly. I mean, when I did that exhibition with Kieran, you know, my dad died in the middle of us getting that together, and his dad died as well. And that really changed the tempo of things. You know, that trying to paint through grief is really hard. And I think there was a moment where I needed silence as well. I had to switch off the music and readdress everything.
When we first met, we met at a Monday Muse dinner that KTW, she does Monday Muse, and she does these dinners every month or so, I think. And that's where Anna and I met, and we both had a traumatic time, and we were both, I think I was talking about having to turn the music off, because I'm the same. I always have music on and I'm always dancing around because I work so big. It is like a dance making a painting as well, and that's how I'd always worked. But then when we met, I was just like, I can't do that anymore. I can't listen to the music for a bit. It changed, and I think we just connected on that night over that sort of thing, and so we've stayed in touch this year and got to know each other's work a bit more, and it's been really nice. It's such a lovely thing to have a community of artists, that women artists. I think that's something that I really needed, because I'm quite isolated in my studio, and well, I mean, artists are, aren't they, anyway? And for me, it's great to meet somebody so like-minded that has similar influences in their painting and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think now, having kind of almost cleared out all of my shit, for want of a better word, you know, I think, you know, Guston was kind of right. I mean, there's a great quote that everyone knows, that he says, you know, first off, you start in the studio and everybody is in there with you, and then one by one people leave. And I think when we met, we were probably at a similar stage. I mean, I really felt like everybody had left, and I was kind of in this silence and the kind of pain of isolation. And I think as a painter, you learn to work through that painful isolation, and you come out the other side. And now I feel like in this really wonderful kind of emancipation moment again, where I am connecting with other people. and finding like-minded people around me, and being championed by people like Helen has brought me into this project, and I feel so lucky. I mean, it's so generous when somebody connects with you and then is supportive. I mean, it's invaluable. And I think over the last couple of years, I've met a few women like that who, you start to learn to work off positive energy. And I think that's what I'm doing in my work now. Now I just work with energy. It feels like, it's very intuitive. And I think you start to tune that. The more you kind of work in isolation, the more you listen to your body. And as Helen was saying, it's very physical painting. If you paint big, you're very in your body, and you have to start listening to it. And I still never think about the work as, oh, is that going to resonate with someone else? Is that going to sell? Is that color going to be the color that pops? It's very much about how I feel while I'm painting it. And it's the same when you meet people. It's very much now I'm quite attuned with, moving towards the cool people and moving away from the people that are maybe a little less helpful. Well, I was just overjoyed that Helen reached out, actually, and I think there are guardian angels in my life. So there's always moments where someone, I think, you're having a really hard time possibly, and then someone will kind of pop up and believe in you, and you'll be like, oh right, the next thing. So yeah, Helen reached out, and really very moved by that, and it just so happened that it kind of it came at a time when I was making these drawings, which were actually based on this painting back there, which was an abstract. So my work's getting more and more, I guess, kind of about shape and color, and the kind of the imagery is getting more and more pared down and hard edged. And I actually painted over an old painting. I hadn't ordered any new stretchers, and I was looking at some of the stuff that I've got in the studio that I wanted to keep, and stuff that I felt like I was able to paint over. And sometimes I like to paint over an image because there's a kind of a resistance there, a kickback from the image underneath. And I hadn't planned that image, and it just kind of appeared. And I was sitting looking at it, and I could see the word no appear in those two kind of diamond shapes. And so I started making a few drawings from it. And I think there was possibly a resonance with stuff that was happening in the world, or maybe stuff that was happening in my life. And the word no felt really pertinent to me. And because this project is coming out around International Women's Day, that felt like, an important word to put out into the world. Mm-hmm. And so when UNIT contacted me via Helen, they were looking at some of my paintings and thinking about maybe they could be prints, but I felt that no needed to go out into the world, and it's been a dream, just working with Make Ready, the printmakers, and it's been a really positive experience. I feel very energized by it all. I'm excited to see Helen's bag.
I'm so glad that you could get involved. It was really good because I've been watching your work and just loving it, and buying all the prints that you put on the Artist Support Pledge, and I really wanted to. When they gave me the opportunity to recommend someone, it was instantly going to be you because it just speaks to me, your work. I've been doing a collaboration for UNIT with. Last year I did a handbag with my friend Sarah Lewis, who is she's a filmmaker, and she's an artist herself, a filmmaker, but she's also been making some felt bags, which I always thought were gorgeous. And she wanted to turn one of my paintings last year into a bag. So we did a small handbag, and it worked out really well, really looked nice in the felt. It's got a texture that's it's different because it's matte, but it's similar to my paintings, and the colours are really amazing in this Danish felt that she uses. So it really had a sort of sensuality like the paintings when we turned it into a bag. So when UNIT asked me to do a project for International Women's Day, I thought I'd really like to do another bag and do a really big weekend one. And at the time I was making a painting, a really massive diptych, the biggest painting that I've ever made, which is nearly 4 meters tall by 5 meters wide or something. And Sarah saw that one and said it would be really nice to do that kiss on a bag. So that's what we've done. And she's just taken my image and turned it into this felt creation, and it looks amazing. And she's got really fantastic embroidery studios in East End of London that have done a really good job, and I'm really excited to see the final thing. And it's big as well, because we wanted to play with scale. So I'd originally made a handbag, but this one is massive, and it kind of fits with the size of the painting. And yeah, it can be a weekend bag, so people can take it away.
I love that our work can go out into the world in other ways, because I like making work that can be worn, and I think that's really exciting when it's not just confined to the white cube. It's nice.
Yeah, you've made t-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff as well, haven't you?
Yeah, kind of in collaboration with Kieran again. But I think that came naturally from just wanting the work to kind of move. And I think there was a moment where when I had this wonderful opportunity to work with the Ballet Boys, and as I was working with dancers, that was making me think about costume. And so I was starting to think about wearable paintings.
I was asked to do a kimono, and I'm quite excited. I'd like to do it.
I've been wanting to do a kimono.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
I think my painting would. I think one of the paintings would look amazing.
Yeah, and that's really sensual, very boudoir. I was just going to say, I think the feedback loop of talking to people who inspire you, who are in your life, other painters, are so vital. And I think it is quite difficult making work in a vacuum. So, I mean, when I was at the Royal College, the advice that the tutors gave us was, get drunk with people in your year, go out and form alliances. But I think for me as a mother and an older person who was actually starting to give up the drink for various health reasons, I couldn't really do that. So it's nice when you go out into the world and you meet people who maybe are at a similar stage in your life, or
it's such a shame for students now, because my son's just started Goldsmiths, and they've had no interaction with any other student. They've not been able to go down the pub and get pissed, and he's really missing that that's what he expected from a university experience, and it's not happening. And it's such a shame for them, because it is a really important aspect of going to uni. I think it's something that you need to vibe off other people, and that's where ideas come from. And it's such a shame for them that during this pandemic that's just been taken away.
No, equally, I've got a mate who's at the Royal College now, but she's older as well, with 3 kids, so she's trying to homeschool and pull out this stuff. Can you imagine?
Oh my god. That must be so hard.
So hard. And the only way, I think the only way my work was pushed on when I was back at college was because someone was chucking away a big stretcher, and I was like, oh, I've never painted that big before, and I grabbed that. And I would never have kind of really figured out that painting was about the body or being in my body unless I'd been in a physical space. So I do not know how people are navigating this stuff, being so isolated when you're
really difficult for
studying. Yeah, really hard.
Yeah, I start with a little study like these ones behind me. I just make a little painting, and initially I just make them for myself to work out the colours, because I paint so big. It's an awful waste of paint if I make a mistake, and I've just spent 40 quid on a really lush blue or something. So I wanted to work them out small and kind of get them right at that size, and then I just project it and blow it up and make it into the big canvas. And initially these were just for myself. I didn't think that anybody else was ever going to see those, but then some galleries came and they did see them, and they were like, these are really beautiful in their own right, so we could sell these as well as part of your body of work. And so I've ended up, I don't know whether I spend more time on the studies now, but still they're a tool that I use to make it easier for me when I get to a bigger scale. There's something really lush and juicy about oils. It gives them that sensual, tactile feeling that I wanted, which also relates to representing the subject matter that I represent, sexuality.
And for me, my process changes all the time. I think I feel like I'm chasing something, and as soon as I kind of get too comfortable with a way of working, I want to disrupt that and change it. So yeah, it depends, how I'm choosing to work at the time. Sometimes I'll change it to the point where I'll work on unstretched canvas on the floor. And then I might stretch it and then work on top of it. So I guess sometimes if I'm working on the floor, I'm working with acrylic, and then I'll stretch it up and paint on top with oil. Sometimes it's about working on a sexily pre-stretched canvas that I bought from pre-stretched, and that can end up on the wall and the floor as well. I think the process can be likened to almost like a physical activity like sex or boxing. So it's the canvases sometimes get chucked around quite a lot. I did spend time kind of almost like meditating on the blank canvas, and I think when I was a kid, actually, I was kind of tapping into this childhood thing. As a kid, I'd get so bored and kind of creatively look at the floor or look at a bush and see an image appear. And I almost managed to develop that skill with looking at a blank canvas, and an image would appear, and I would then, work with my imagination with that. But there's been a feedback loop recently where I've been starting a drawing and then drawing that up onto the canvas and then changing something and then going back to the drawing, almost like this kind of feedback loop between the drawing and the painting, where neither is necessarily informing the other, but there is a conversation happening, like that one with the shapes and then the node that appeared for me. So it really changes, and that's what kind of keeps me excited.
I think you can really see that in your work as well. Like it looks like you're dancing around things, and it looks like you're. I love that experimentation. It really excites me, and it makes me think that I want to do that more as well. That I want to change my practice and go outside of the boundaries, because I'm very restrained, really, and I work out the crops and the boundaries of the body, of the individual bodies, and quite often that can be quite abstract, and I stick within that, and the sensual mark making that I'm is within those boundaries. But I'm thinking now, I'm very excited about experimenting and changing that out and seeing where that goes as well. And that's probably through looking at Anna's work that I've come to that. So that's why, that's why I put her up for this project, and that, because it's just made me very excited looking at her work this year.
That's so nice to hear. It's so nice
informing, that I can change things up a bit. It's exciting.
I mean, the one thing for me, which I think some people have kind of criticized me for, is that I put stuff on Instagram unfinished sometimes, and I'll put up a quick sketch, and I had one female painter friend said to me, she said, "Oh, God, it's so exposing, you're putting things out before they're finished." And I like that, I really enjoy putting things out and testing it and going, God, that feels uncomfortable, and seeing what comes from that. But me and Helen were talking before, and recently I felt like the real need to have control. And my work is getting much more boundaried. Like Helen's wanting to get freer, I'm wanting to get tighter at the moment. But I don't know how long it will last for. I'm very, very emotional.
But it's just nice to have that vibe, isn't it? That we're vibing off each other and getting something from each other. I really like that, and I'm really looking forward to coming to your studio when lockdown's over.
Yeah, me too. I want to see yours. I want to see those big ones. I mean, how big did you say the Kiss were? I love the Kiss.
It's nearly 4 meters tall. It went yesterday, actually. They sent a crane. They sent a flatbed truck, an 18-ton truck, and a crane to get it out of here yesterday. And it's going to Australia. It's a commission for Australia. So, yeah, it's on its way.
It's pretty ballsy. Going to Australia, the biggest delivery package to Australia. That's impressive.
They had to put it upright on the truck because he said, "Oh, it's over 10 foot wide, so they can't. It's not allowed on British roads." At the moment, I'm doing a print project with Paul Stolper Gallery in London. I'm doing some screen prints with him, which are going to be launched in the next month or so, and there's going to be a little online show of those, and it's called Lyrical Lines, because a lot of my titles I take from songs back to music, and so these 4 prints that he chose at random from my paintings, and they all happen to have they were either song lyrics as the titles or poems that I'd been listening to. So that's my next thing that's happening. It's really exciting. And obviously the International Women's Day.
I have got this with UNIT coming up, and I've got a group show that I'm in at Hester Coombs Gallery in Somerset, where I did a residency last summer, which was brilliant. It was such a useful residency because I think I was kind of very low after the big show with Kieran and kind of processing a lot of grief, and it was really wonderful because they kind of just left me alone for a week, and I spent time in the gardens. And there was this wonderful garden that was sunken, designed by oh God, I've forgotten her name, Gertrude Jekyll, and I just wanted to kind of be held by that garden, and that's where I started making my text pieces. I did this painting called Hold Me. So yeah, I've been invited to be part of a group show, and there's some really big names in it, so it's very exciting. And I was also meant to do a residency at the beginning of the pandemic at City in Guilds Art College, but that's got postponed till next year. But that's going to be really exciting because I'll get access to kind of various different processes, like I started spending some time in the print studio there and in the glass making studio, the workshop there. So yeah, I really want to work with glass. I think, having said I want to just be a painting geek and just work within the kind of rectangle, actually now I want to start exploding it and seeing how a feedback loop working with other materials will feed in. But with ambition, I think I've always just been very quietly ambitious. I'm definitely not somebody with sharp elbows. I've never been good at kind of social climbing or going into a private view and working the room. That's not my style. I think both me and Helen have connected on that. When we met at this dinner, it was very glittery, and we both may be quite shy, and so I think I'm just quietly ambitious. I just keep going. I think someone once said, the people who make it are the ones that just keep going. And I think I realize as an artist, I like the lifestyle. My son is 16. We both live in a little flat. We have a great time together. I don't need a lot of stuff, but I want to be taken seriously, and
that's another thing that we related on, because I've got a 16-year-old as well, and a kid that's just gone off to uni. So we're both sort of looking at the horizon, and we're seeing all this sort of freedom, this time we're going to have on our hands because our kids have grown up, and just the chance to experiment. And I quite fancy making some sculptures, and I can see that there's this time opening up where we're just going to have the freedom to experiment, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if I'm going to do Georgia O'Keeffe and end up in the Mexican desert.
Yeah, shall we? Shall we go get a studio in the Mexican desert? That would be really exciting.
I think, you have to keep reassessing and looking at how we're framing things. I mean, I think language is really, really important, and even how things go out in press releases and what have you. I think you do have to keep readdressing the balance somehow. And both me and Helen have had male mentors, which, like you say, you
that
don't
really
get
encouraged the work. And we're not trying to disclude men in any way. It's exactly. Important, it's important in my subject matter as well. It's about female body, but it's all there are men in there as well. It's about the interconnection between people. Well, Choose the Challenge for me was the titles. It just made me think about the equality in the art world, and the fact that women have been overlooked for so many years. And when I was 18, just about to go off to art college, the Guerrilla Girls did that poster of how many what the percentage of female people in major institutions were, and it was so pathetic. It was like 5% of women, and then 85% of the nudes in the gallery situation were all painted by men, but were female bodies. So it was just horrifying. And I've watched them as the years have gone on, and they've redone the statistics, and each year it gets worse, and you just cannot believe that still we are really challenged by the fact that the women are just not represented by our institutions. So this was something that came up for me when I read that line, Choose to Challenge, because it needs to be changed, and it is changing. And lots of women are championing other women, like Art Girl Rising and Katie Hessel's doing the Great Women Artists. So there's definitely a force that is changing things now, but it's not having a major impact yet. And I'm really excited about a time when this changes things, and it does actually start to filter down into art institutions, museums.
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo that, and I think it's hard to keep your eye on those statistics, and I think so little is known about kind of power dynamics. I think that we're made to believe as women that we've cracked it now, and feminism is done, or maybe feminism is a dirty word, or maybe I've certainly come against some hate in my very brief career, early career from men, and saying that you're riding this feminist wave, and so I think there's power dynamics can happen, in quite a systemic, maybe more insidious way, because I think as a young woman, when I was younger, I didn't really have that kind of vision and realize that women needed to support other women. It was a very different time, and I think it's vital. And I think you do have to maybe tune out some of the people that are trying to tell you that it's you're getting success because you're hitting a tight zeitgeist at the moment. I don't think that's the case. I think it's still so important to keep your eye on the ball on this one. And not get belittled. It's so easy to be belittled because of something, and not realize that actually that's very counterproductive.
And I think that because we use the body in our work, both me and Anna as well, that can be frowned upon. That if we're talking about women's desire or women's sexuality, those things, are looked upon as titillation if a woman looks at those aspects in her work. And it's really upsetting that that's the way it's looked at. Nobody would ever question that if it was a man.
it is crazy, and it's amazing how the male gaze is still out there, you know, and unchallenged. And yeah, I mean, I think for me, I really needed to take the body out of my work because I felt that stigma so keenly, and I wanted to be, you know, clear and say, no, I'm a good painter. Actually, it's not necessarily about the subject matter. Let's take the subject matter out, and you know, but I think I'd quite like to put it back in at times. You know, I really want to kind of challenge being, you know, I want to resist classification. I want to resist being put in a box. I mean, I didn't become a painter to be put in a box. You know, I became a painter to feel free and to meet interesting people. And you know, it's not for the faint-hearted being an artist. It's not necessarily an easy career path. So yeah, I don't want to be belittled or told that I'm not as good as, but I also want to feel free.
Yeah, me too. And I choose to challenge that outlook in a way by keeping the body in my works, because I just want to say I have a right to paint this. It's something that I know about. It's my you know, the female body is something I live in it every day, and I understand it, and I love the forms and the shapes that it creates, and I want to use them in my painting. So for me, it's really important to keep it in, you know, but
I think that's equally,
maybe abstract it more as well.
I think that's equally valid. I think, you know, I want the push and pull. I mean, I think the most powerful thing I realized in later life is that, you know, I reserve to change my mind. You know, I'm allowed to change my mind, and that's such a brilliant thing when you realize you can do that. I think that's also why I really hate sometimes talking out in the world or talking with press, because focus on the thing that you don't want them to focus on. It's quite difficult to control your narrative out in the world. And I guess that's why both me and Helen paint. You know, sometimes we want to communicate without words.
Yeah, we don't want to talk. Although I do want to, like, this is really nice because this is getting rid of that isolation. But obviously, yeah, we want to express ourselves by paint, true paint. That's what we do.
For me now, everything is about a personal connection. You know, that's how things are meaningful in life.